Undeclared wars are commonplace. Tragically, our government engages in preemptive war, otherwise known as aggression, with no complaints from the American people. Sadly, we have become accustomed to living with the illegitimate use of force by government. To develop a truly free society, the issue of initiating force must be understood and rejected.
What if sometimes, to love your country, you had to alter or abolish the government? What if Jefferson was right? What if that government is best which governs least? What if it is dangerous to be right when the government is wrong? What if it is better to perish fighting for freedom than to live as a slave? What if freedom's greatest hour of danger is now?
Hi, everyone. Judge Andrew Napolitano here for Judging Freedom. Today is Monday, February 9th, 2026. Ian Proud, the former British diplomat, will join us in just a moment on Is Sir Keir Starmer's government on thin ice? But first this. Don't you just cringe when people say, I told you so? Sorry, I told you gold and silver would reap the benefits due to excessive money printing, inflation, and global uncertainty. It's here. It's happened. Gold and silver have reached all-time highs. Did you call Lear Capital and buy some? It's not too late. Experts are predicting higher prices ahead. Why? Nothing has changed. Geopolitical chaos, cost of living crises, and a weaker dollar are driving central banks to boost their gold reserves. Forecasts suggest gold could hit $6,000 an ounce and silver $200 an ounce. Even Morgan Stanley ditched the 60-40 rule for 60-20-20, putting 20% into precious metals. They're getting educated, and you should too. Call the best in the business and the people I trust. Lear Capital. Get their reports, get the facts, get some gold and silver. Tell them the judge sent you and get up to $20,000 in bonus gold or silver. Call 800-511-4620 or go to LearJudgeNap.com. Ian Proud, welcome back, my dear friend. Always a pleasure to be with you. But let's get right to the latest news. Is the British government about to collapse?
I don't think it's about to collapse. The Prime Minister is on the cliff edge, and the big question mark is whether the Prime Minister himself will survive. The government itself has too big a parliamentary majority to collapse, but actually the question now is whether Keir Starmer survives.
What is the origin of this? Chris, cut number 9.
I am sorry. Sorry for what was done to you. Sorry that so many people with power failed you. Sorry for having believed Mandelson's lies and appointed him. And sorry that even now you're forced to watch this story unfold in public once again. But I also want to say this. In this country, we will not look away. We will not shrug our shoulders. And we will not allow the powerful to treat justice as optional. We will pursue the truth. We will uphold the integrity of public life. And we will do everything within our power and in the interests of justice to ensure accountability is delivered. That is what the public expects. That is what the victims deserve. And it is what I will do.
Does that resonate with the British public? Does it resonate with his party in the House of Commons?
Well, I don't think it's really washing with the British public, and it certainly isn't resonating with his party in the House of Commons. The leader of the Scottish Labour Party today has made a speech at lunchtime, UK time, calling for him to resign because he's now become a major distraction. Members of the public are just shocked that he actually, knowing Mandelson's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, the well-known paedophile sex trafficker, knowing that he still made Mandelson Britain's ambassador to the United States of America. bypassing all sorts of good practice, I think, in terms of whether this was the right person for the job and whether he should have access to top secret British intelligence materials, amongst other things, beyond the truly awful look and feel of that appointment.
If if Epstein was a Mossad asset, it's certainly not inconceivable and maybe even probable that if British secrets were passed to Epstein, he passed them on to the Mossad. That may very well be some sort of a criminal act under the Secrets Act, the British Secrets Act. The ambassador can't reveal everything he knows to a person who doesn't have the obligation to keep it secret. That's a definition of violating the law, correct?
That's correct. We have the Official Secrets Act as amended on several occasions. All diplomats, actually, all ambassadors, of course, are bound by that because they have access to intelligence material, because they get regularly briefed by MI6 and the sometimes foreign intelligence agencies too. I've had meetings in CIA in Langley before myself. So yeah, I mean, this is really important stuff. Obviously, Jeffrey Epstein was already dead, when Mandelson was made ambassador to Washington, but his friendship with him goes back years, including to the time when Mandelson was, a British cabinet minister. He was forced to resign twice at that time as well. So, this is not a trustworthy man, and it was a chronic error of judgment on the part of the Prime Minister Keir Starmer to give him that top-profile job, not least because an ambassador had already been lined up, my former ambassador to Moscow, Sir Tim, now Lord Barrow.
How deep into the British government, and I don't necessarily mean Starmer, this may go back to Tony Blair, I don't know, and I'm not picking on Prime Minister Blair, you'll have to tell me how deep this goes, but how deep did the Epstein tentacles reach into the British government? And was his relationship with the former Prince Andrew a tentacle into the government?
It was a very narrow tentacle, I think, into the government. Obviously, Prince Andrew was a British trade representative. He used to fly around the world using prostitutes everywhere. And, we all know about that. It's been well publicized in a book by Andrew Lowry called Entitled, recently. And he wouldn't really have had access to many kind of trade secret, many kind of real secrets on foreign policy, frankly, in that role. But nevertheless, he was in a position of considerable influence, of course. He had regular meetings with senior government ministers in pursuing that work. And he was, friendly with Epstein and meeting women that Epstein had provided for him, it seems.
Here's, here's Kim Badenoch, the leader of the Conservatives on the floor of the House of Commons, cut number 7.
It is now up to Labour MPs to do the right thing. I know there are many of them who are horrified by what has happened. We saw that in the House of Commons just yesterday. They might now expect the Prime Minister to take responsibility, but we know he won't. He will have to be dragged out of number 10. So, I am making them an offer. If they want the change they know the country needs, come and speak to my whips, and let's talk seriously about a vote of no confidence to force the moment.
Will a vote of no confidence in the government of Sir Keir Starmer pass if taken in the House of Commons in this current environment, Ian?
It would be a really close call, to be honest. The Labour Party has such a parliamentary majority that even if some Labour Party members of Parliament defected to the Tories and the Lib Dems defected, obviously aligned with the Tories, then it would still be a close call whether they'd be able to get the majority large enough to effectively kind of force Starmer out. Now, sometimes history shows that even a narrow loss can be so devastating for a sitting Prime Minister that they're forced to kind of see the mood of the room and step down. But let's see what happens. I don't see at the moment that they could muster sufficient votes to have a parliamentary majority, but the mood in the Labour Party seems to be changing quickly. And importantly, other kind of senior Labour figures, including the current mayor of Greater Manchester and the former Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner, who was forced to quit herself on the back of a corruption scandal relating to taxes on her, how she purchased her property in Brighton, waiting in the wings, angling to try and replace them as well. So the whole thing is a complete mess. But Starmer seems to be a bit of a Teflon-coated survivor. He's savagely got rid of his chief of staff today, hoping that'll be enough red meat. Let's see whether it will be or not.
Who would replace Starmer if he were to resign?
Well, the two lead candidates are Andy Burnham, the mayor and former Tony Blair era minister, the mayor of Greater Manchester, now no longer an MP. He'd need to stand to be an MP again. He was blocked by Starmer from doing that just 2 weeks ago. So that would be a challenge for him, but not insurmountable, of course. And Angela Rayner, the former Deputy Prime Minister, who's very much on the left of the party, more so than Starmer, still quite popular in the grassroots, but actually had to resign under a scandal because of her sort of, frankly, dishonest tax dealings.
Got it. Here is Congressman Ro Khanna of California. Congressman Khanna, a liberal Democrat, along with Congressman Thomas Massie, a libertarian Republican, have led the charge in the U.S. Congress for the exposition of the Epstein files. In fact, the two of them, against all odds, succeeded in getting the Epstein Transparency Act passed unanimously in the United States Senate and with only one dissenting vote in the House of Representatives. This is after President Trump himself lobbied against it. And then, of course, Trump signed it into law, and it resulted in a little bit coming out, a little bit coming out, a little bit coming out, and then the 3 million pages of documents a week or so ago, which has caused a lot of public attention on all this. So Congressman Khanna is answering questions of a British reporter about Mr. Mandelson's ties to the British government and to the monarchy. I'd like your thoughts on this.
What do you say to the man formerly known as Prince Andrew and to Peter Mandelson with regard to giving evidence to your committee?
Well, Mandelson may bring down the whole government, from what I hear. He just engaged in terrible behavior. I mean, the allegations are very serious that he was working for Gordon Brown and then feeding information about UK possibly buying euros and having Epstein trade on that. I mean, it is a deeply, deeply troubling. And Epstein's, I saw this interview with Epstein's former girlfriend talking about how someone is a loser if they weren't mentioned in the Epstein files. It's a window into the elite impunity, this club. And by the way, I think this is the most vulnerable the British monarchy has ever been. I mean, I heard they were asking the Queen questions about the Epstein class. They ought to ask the King and Queen questions, and maybe this will be the end of the monarchy.
What do you think it could be the end of the monarchy?
Well, if they don't have answers, or if they're implicated with an Epstein class, not a good look for the British monarchy.
What questions does the King have to answer?
Well, the King has to answer what he knew. What he knew about Andrew. And just stripping Andrew of a title is not enough. I mean, Andrew needs to come before our committee and start answering questions. I mean, look, if you have allegations of raping a young girl, I don't think the appropriate punishment is you no longer get to be a prince. There's got to be more than that.
Do you think the royal family must have known something they're not telling us?
They need to answer, the King and Queen. And I don't understand. I mean, I don't understand the British custom, but what's up with this, that you're going and someone's asking the Queen a question, the Queen is offended that she's being asking a question? I mean, come on. She wears the same clothes, she eats the same food, she's just a human being. She needs to answer the same questions anyone does.
Are the King and Queen immune from parliamentary inquiry about what they knew about the King's brother?
Yeah, I think so. And to date, in the UK press, there's been no suggestion that His Majesty the King and the Queen linked to this in any way. We have a constitutional monarchy in this country in which the King's role is relevant, but it is largely symbolic in terms of its day-to-day kind of powers, and it takes a lot of its direction from the government in terms of the yearly speech that the King makes, and so on. There's absolutely no suggestion that the King is implicated this in any way, and I'd be surprised, frankly, he obviously knew that his younger brother was a playboy, of course. I think it'd be a stretch to suggest that he was aware of his dealings with Epstein and the extent of those, and to the extent to which pressure has built up over this issue. We've seen the response in terms of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor being stripped of his powers, privileges, and actually his free kind of housing in Windsor as well. So I think the King's response so far has been appropriate. I see no kind of parliamentary blowback, and I don't think there's a mechanism for that anyway. Quite frankly, I mean, the King's or the monarch's powers have been limited by Parliament over years, but that doesn't give them a direct day-to-day kind of powers to call the King. That would be quite an exceptional constitutional precedent that we've never seen before.
Does this crisis at 10 Downing Street benefit the Conservatives at all?
I think it benefits them massively, but I think who it benefits more is the Reform Party of the UK, because the Tories themselves have been losing members of Parliament, like nobody's business.
That's our friend Nigel Farage.
Yes, indeed, that's Nigel Farage, and so the Tories have been losing people to his party, because actually it's very difficult to. I mean, there is a uniparty in the UK comprised of the Tories, the Conservatives, the Labour Party, and the Liberal Democrats, which on foreign policy at least is actually impossible to tell them apart from each other in terms of the liberal globalist, kind of agenda, which is kind of failing citizens across Europe and in Britain, of course. So no Reform will gain from this, but of course the Conservatives will try to kind of get as much benefit out of it as well too.
What becomes of Ukraine's relationship to Britain, Germany, France, and the other members of the EU? I know Britain's not in the EU anymore, but the others, once the special military operation is over?
Well, on that, can I firstly say something about His Majesty the King? And one of the things which I think has been shameless about Keir Starmer's government is that they've kept wheeling out the King to meet Zelensky whenever he visits the UK, which was a gross and indecent, frankly, kind of use of the monarch's time, getting him far too involved in the utter failure of our foreign policy as it relates to Ukraine. Concerning your question about Ukraine's future relationship with Britain and Germany, France in particular, but the rest of Europe as well. I mean, Ukraine will feel that we failed them. We offered right at the start of the war to provide them for help for as long as it takes. It has taken too long. We haven't provided enough. We should have never have let them get into the war in the first place, quite frankly, stoking up their aspirations towards NATO membership, and they are failing and will fail, and Russia will emerge from any peace deal in a strategically stronger position, and they'll feel let down. Whether that really kind of matters in the UK is another matter, but I mean, of course, what we'll end up with is a disgruntled, embittered nationalist country like Ukraine, with an army of 800,000 people that we are paying for, with worrying neo-Nazi kind of fringe groups playing an overly prominent role in politics, hating us, and basically causing potentially difficulties for us at a time when Europe is already in itself in decline.
Wow. What will the British government do to Ukraine when it's a shadow of its former self? Will it still be giving away money that it doesn't have to pay its own bills to Zelensky's successors?
Well, if the Starmer government remains, probably yes. And if the Conservatives get in, which frankly seems unlikely at this stage, but hypothetically speaking, then probably yes. We've nailed our flag to the mast of this sinking ship, and like the captain of the Titanic, Starmer is going down, with it, quite frankly. So I see no change. I think the risk for Britain and for Europe is that at the end of the war in Ukraine, we obviously will want to help Ukraine with its reconstruction, and as it emerges shattered from this war that we imposed upon it, of course. But we will also need to have some sort of strategic reset with Russia too, because without that, with the Ukraine being turbocharged into EU ahead of Turkey, ahead of Serbia and other countries that are better placed, than the Ukraine, they will, like the Balts and the Poles, have this essentially antagonistic posture towards Russia, and their membership of the EU will simply be pressing the pause button on the next war with Russia. So I mean, there has to be some smart thinking, and unfortunately, I see no evidence that there is any smart thinking in Brussels or in London on the bigger strategic sort of game at play here, because we could just be having a short delay before the next much more violent and devastating for European citizens war with Russia.
You mentioned the Poles. Here's the Polish Prime Minister, Donald Tusk. I don't know of any evidence for this, but this is what he says. Epstein was running, quote, a KGB honeypot. Watch this.
And more analytical commentary appearing in all the press outlets and across global media platforms. All of this concerns the growing suspicion that this truly unprecedented pedophilia scandal was, in fact, deliberately co-organized by the Russian special services. Actually, there are well over 1,000 individual documents that directly concern the life and career of Vladimir Putin. 9,000 concern Moscow. I'm talking about the Russian political environment. The FBI claims it had information that Mr. Epstein managed part of Vladimir Putin's assets. It is known that Epstein archived all his messages, emails, and documents. He archived videos and photos. He recorded and filmed influential and powerful leaders across the Western world, including various presidents, several prime ministers, and the CEOs of the world's largest companies. That this was a carefully prepared intelligence operation by the Russian KGB agency. This classic so-called honey trap, which is essentially just sweet bait, this was a trap specifically designed for the elites of the Western world, and most notably targeting the United States.
Israeli to me than KGB, but and I've not heard this argument anywhere else, but this leads to my question: how does the Epstein file revelations resonate in Europe?
Well, ministers and other governments have had to resign because of linkages to somebody just left. Was it the French government? Some government over the past day or so. So it touches several governments. I'd be surprised if it doesn't touch on somebody in the Polish system as well. But you really shouldn't listen to anything that Donald Tusk says. Everything is some sort of Russian conspiracy in his mind.
Yes, they're so hateful of the Russians that they're not credible at all. But he is the Prime Minister of Poland, and he did make those very unfounded statements. But last question, because you've written about this: do you think that the Kremlin would accept any security guarantees in the form of troops on the ground in a post-war Ukraine? Troops other than Ukrainian troops?
No, certainly not NATO troops. And they've said this all along. I mean, they fought this war to prevent NATO's expansion to their western border. Why then, having agreed to end the war in a strategically superior position to Ukraine and its proxies, i.e. Europe, and also, of course, the United States, why would they then agree to allow British and French troops into Ukraine after the war's finished? I mean, that is sort of idiotic thinking to imagine that they would even remotely think this was manageable. They won't. They will not agree to this. This has been clear all along. We keep deluding ourselves with these fantasies that if we keep pushing the envelope with the Russians, they'll somehow back down. It's been 12 years now, guys, and they really haven't, and they're not going to. So stop coming up with these stupid ideas.
Great observations. Thank you, Ian. Thanks especially for your insights into the British government, which is still not well understood or appreciated over here, but very helpful that we have you to ask about this from time to time. I hope you come back and visit with us again soon. All my best to you.
You're welcome, Judge. All the best. Nice to see you again.
Thank you. Coming up at 3 o'clock from the Quincy Institute, Ben Freeman. How dangerous, how utterly reckless is a military budget of $1.5 trillion? We're going to find out. Judge Napolitano for Judging Freedom.